So historically Black colleges and universities. This is a project that I started last year, early in the summer. And I gave a talk at the State of the Map conference. So I don't know if anybody was there, but it's online. There's like a video on YouTube, so you can check that out. So I'll be covering a lot of what I covered in that talk, but also giving sort of like an update. So before we get into stuff, what are HBCUs? So these are schools that were established prior to 1964 as a response to the racist admission policies that a lot of American universities had in place, so that Black Americans had a place to go to college. There aren't that many. They're located primarily in the South, like capital S South, the US, like Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, places like that. But they have a pretty large collective student body. It's at this point, it's a very old system, very well established. There are people who have gone to schools for generations, just like any other school. So they're very well established institutions, but not very well mapped on OSM. I happen to be looking through, I actually can't remember how I got onto this topic, but I decided to look up HBCUs on OSM and realized that they tended to be chronically undermapped. That's sort of a subjective term, but just as an example, this is Grambling State University in, I believe, Louisiana. There's not a whole lot here. You wouldn't really know that this is a university except for the fact that it says that it's a university, but other than that, there's like not much of an indication. So compare that to Laramie County Community College. This is, I believe, in Wyoming or Montana. This is a college with a smaller student body. It's in a more remote area, but as you can tell, it's very well mapped. All the parking lots are mapped. There's walkways, all the buildings are there, everything. This is also in pretty stark contrast to my own school, Penn State, which is very extensively mapped. There's entrances to buildings and ramps and all sorts of stuff. A lot of micro mapping here, which kind of makes sense because we have a pretty good geography program. There's a lot of people who are interested in like open source mapping specifically. So OSM is kind of a natural, it's a place that they gravitate towards. And so a lot of our campus is very thoroughly mapped. So are all primarily white colleges in the US well mapped? No, and I'll get back to that in a minute. However, on a list that I put together, there's 107 historically Black colleges, and maybe less than 10 were pretty well mapped. I didn't find any that were mapped on the level of Penn State. Very few colleges are, but still, it was a pretty stark contrast. So I put together a spreadsheet because, like I said, there's 107 of them. These are university campuses. There's a lot going on. And so it's, as much as I wanted to, I couldn't be the only person to just like go through manually and add everything to all these campuses. So put together a spreadsheet, put together information on how much of the campus is mapped, what needs to be mapped, stuff like that. And then I published it, kind of put it out into the world, out of my hands. And got a pretty good response. So this was Grambling State. Again, this was a screenshot that I took either right before or after I published that spreadsheet, but it was early on in the process. And this is a screenshot that I took recently, yesterday. So still has work to be done, but it's definitely much better filled in. There are buildings that are mapped that weren't mapped previously. It has parking lots, all sorts of stuff like that. Correct names on buildings. This is Kentucky State University, which is the first school that IMAP. This was actually a little bit into the process. At this point, I had mapped these walkways before taking this screenshot. And this is what it looks like as of yesterday. There are actually, between starting this project and today, there are a couple of buildings that have been built and they are now mapped on OSM, so that's great. This is Miles College, same thing. A lot of it's fleshed out at this point. This is, I believe, Mississippi Valley State University. Similar success story. So this is great. But like I said, it's been about a year. I have deliberately been sort of hands-off on this project. I don't really feel like it's my place to be spearheading this. I want it to be an open, collaborative kind of situation. And so I haven't really touched it beyond sort of like poking at it here and there, adding some things, but it's kind of where it was about a year ago. I think that the reason for this is that there has been a lack of outreach to the schools that are being mapped. And I think that sort of institutional support is what sustains very high quality, very detailed, and very up-to-date, timely mapping. So like Penn State, for instance, we have students who use OSM in class projects. I'm going to have my students contribute to OSM for a lab this semester. So at least every like 6 or so months, we have a group of like 30 to 100 people contributing data. So part of that is Penn State and State College, where we're located. So there's this sort of constant churn of contributions that are coming out of Penn State that doesn't exist at other schools. And so that can result in undermapping, if you want to call it that. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible. I think it just involves people talking to people. So that's, in order to sustain this project, I think that's the #1 priority. Another thing that I would like to involve in this is other minority institutions. So like tribal colleges, university, it's the same story, that they're very important in their communities, and they tend to be not very well represented on OSM. There's maybe streets, and that's about it. So that is also important. And if you want to make a small contribution, you can do micro mapping. That's, it would be great to have all the benches on a campus on OSM, but like I said, in order to make this a project that is not only ensures the comprehensive mapping of campuses around the US, but also keeps those maps updated, I think that institutional support is really important. So if you want to contribute or participate, this is the URL, tiny.cc/HBCU OSM. This is clickable. I'll share a slide deck, but it's deliberately easy to remember. You can go there. That's the spreadsheet that has pretty much all the information you need to know. There are links to different campuses. They have information on what needs to be mapped, like the general level of what needs to be mapped, stuff like that. And then if you want to reach out to me, this is my contact info, harrisoncole@psu.edu or @harrisoncardo. That's also my website, harrisoncardo.com. If you have any questions about it, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. So we'll stop there.
So I got the right shirt on today because this morning I was actually teaching kids at the summer camp about bike safety. I work at Michigan State University. Actually, I work together with a few HBCUs and MSIs, minority serving institutions, in nuclear physics. So this is definitely my hobby. And I got involved in safe routes to school when my kids started going to school here, and there was a no biking policy, which is not acceptable for me. So I got involved in Safe Routes to School to promote walking and biking to school. So I don't know if you know about Safe Routes to School. It's actually an international project, but in this country, it's funded federally through state departments. And in Michigan, the Michigan Fitness Foundation actually provides funding. So there are different grants available where schools and local communities, they can actually get funded for programs, but also for infrastructure improvements. And I just put a few links here. If you are interested, you can learn more about Safe Routes to School. And the basic idea is that if you look into historically, fewer and fewer kids are actually walking and biking to school. In the 1960s, it was still very common, but nowadays most kids are either driven to school, which is the worst, or they take the bus because safe routes for walking and biking are not available. So we want to change that because it's healthier for kids to get moving, and also it builds community. If kids are out walking along the streets and they get to know the neighborhood, that's actually a positive thing. So this picture was actually taken locally here one day. This is called ACES, All Children Exercise Together. And we had 140 kids ride their bikes from the middle school to the MSU football stadium. And that was that was quite a sight. So this is how we can get involved locally. And this is how I got involved in OpenStreetMap, actually, because in the last few years, our local school district rebuilt all of the elementary schools. And I wanted to be able to map what the best route for walking and biking to the school buildings is. And obviously, most of the maps didn't have the new layout available, but in OpenStreetMap, I can go in there and edit the map and get it up to date very quickly. So I contacted the architecture firm in the school district. So we worked together and got permission to use site plans if they were available. And then you see this on the left here. This is the new Glencairn building as it was presented in an architectural drawing. And I used that information to update the OpenStreetMap while the school actually was being built. And you see on the right, in the middle here, you see the new building with the pathways and sidewalks. Bike parking areas are indicated. Also entrances where the main entrance to the building is. And all those micro mapping things, and more could be done, obviously, actually are very helpful to tell students and parents, you know, this is a good route to get to school and where do I find bike parking and so forth. On the right, you see here aerial images. I took those from Google Earth because they have very recent aerial images. You can see the old building here. And then on the top here, this is the new building as it is present now. So you see there's a big change in the layout, especially for the drop-off loop and the bus loop here. And those are important things. But the OpenStreetMap doesn't show everything that you want to communicate, as for instance, the routes to choose or where other special features are. So I found another application which is called UMap, but it's from France. So I guess it's called UMap, but I'm not sure how they want us to pronounce it. So UMap, I put the link here, is a layer where you can add information to the OpenStreetMap. And it's actually very easy to use. It's very basic. And so I use this to highlight routes and additional information how to get to the school. And I can show this here as an example. This is a different school, Donley Elementary School. And you can see here at the first glance, you see there's green lines. Those are walking routes. And there's blue lines. Those are biking routes. And then I indicate where bike parking is. I indicate crossing guards, where crossing guards are located. The bus drop-off, which is marked in yellow here. I also have the brown is the car drop-off line. There's additional information if you click on these icons here. I mark where the principal's office is. And then in pink here, these are remote drop-off locations. So if the parents want to avoid the traffic jam at the drop-off loop, they can drop their kids off like, a quarter mile away from the building, and then the kids can walk the rest of the way to school. And let's say, for instance, you click on this crossing guard symbol, there's more information provided that you can put in a text box. You even could put a link in here to another web page if you wanted to. So you can provide current information as to what that feature on the map is. So this has been very useful for giving out the information of what good routes to school are and what other features there are in the school area. The other thing I like is this allows collaborative editing. You can allow others to edit this as well. So you can have a local team that provides information on these maps or puts updates in. And you can also put this information in layers. So I don't know if you can see this down here. I can, if I'm not interested in the bus information, I can make that invisible and only highlight, for instance, the biking to school, if that's what I'm interested in. And you can arrange your information in different layers. So if you want to declutter your map as a viewer, you can turn on and off different layers. So that's very useful. And I think there's other features that I haven't actually explored yet. So I really suggest you check it out because I think it's very useful. Here's another example for one of these text boxes that pop up if you click on the icon. So this is a remote drop-off location. And I put information in here, for instance, that there's no supervision at this location and parts of this pathway here is not paved. Now, it just happens that this summer they are paving this pathway. So if you get involved locally, you might also be able to change the landscape around you, not just the map around you. So what needs to be done still is we have to figure out how to effectively share the maps. So one way, of course, is you have to communicate with the schools and the parents, and I'm involved in the local safe routes to school. So we have a committee and we talk to the school district and to the principals. And then with the parents, we share this map online through the link. They can use it on their phone. Everybody nowadays has a portable device where they can look at the map, which is actually very useful because you can zoom in and zoom out. But you also want to share this in printed form. And this is where I still see a little bit of a shortcoming. I can download OpenStreetMap, the base layer, at a very high resolution as a PDF or an SVG file, which is good for printing. But I don't think it works for the UMAP layer. So this is sometimes a challenge to get a good printed version. Then the other part that we, of course, have to work on is to keep the maps up to date. And one thing is to monitor the OpenStreetMap activity. I don't know if you saw the image of Donley Elementary that was circulated on Twitter. The old Donley building is missing because in the meantime, it was demolished and somebody else took it off the map, right? Which is okay because it's actually not there anymore. But earlier, like last year, somebody noticed that inside the building, there was an open area and there were some pathways marked, and you get an error message or a warning that they are disconnected pathways, which is correct because they're inside the building, we can't get to them. Now, this person thought there was a problem and they built passageways through the building to get to those pathways. But it's a school building, you can't just walk through it. It's off limits for public. So that was an edit that was not correct for that building. And if you want to use these maps and provide the right information, you have to monitor them because OpenStreetMap means anybody can edit them. And sometimes those edits are not what you actually would like to see. So the other part is, of course, for the UMAP overlay, you can build a local team to provide the contents and also keep those up to date. And that is separate from OpenStreetMapping. So this is a whole nother group that you can get involved. They don't even have to edit the maps at all, just the layer for the routes and the information. And then lastly, this is how I got involved in the first place, improve the routes to school. Actually, we work with the city of East Lansing and the school district, and we apply for grants, infrastructure grants through Michigan Fitness Foundation to actually build more sidewalks and bike lanes and crosswalks and those things. And there's actually funding available. And if you work with your local community, you can get $200,000 per school to improve the infrastructure around the school. And that's my last slide, and that's all I had to say, besides answering questions.